Okay, first question. I'm doing some research on you, and I come across this story. I don't know if it's legend. You can break it down for us. But basically, one of the worst moments in your career, you get punished unjustly. And because of that punishment, one of the greatest superstars in the history of wrestling is created. Tell us how we get there.
So at that point in time, I'm starting to get some momentum going in my career, and there's a plan in place that I am going to win a very, especially at the time, was a very prestigious tournament called the King of the Ring.
Yeah.
I would be crowned King of the Ring, which would then launch me into a program or an angle with Shawn Michaels, who was champion, or I think at the time when they brought it up, he was either champion at that time or was going to be champion by that time. And I was going to sort of escalate myself up into that higher level of being a heel, a bad guy. And Shawn was a babyface champion. So we were going to go into this program into that year. So it would have been a huge, what we would call push for me in the business.
Like,
right? Yeah. It just would have really been the thing that launched me.
Oh, so this is years into the business. This is not early.
Yeah, it's years into the business, but early for me in WWE to a degree.
Right.
And at that same point in time, the business was going through transitional changes, right? So at that time, I'm still Hunter Hearst Helmsley. I'm the blue blood snob. There's still everybody's got to have sort of gimmicks and characters that are not necessarily just like you're a wrestler, you're fireman or a cop or the clown or
walk out with 2x4.
Whatever it is, the gimmicks are larger than life, sort of cartoony characters. But backstage, there's a group of us that hang out together that were known as the Clique.
Yeah.
Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Sean Waltman, Shawn Michaels, and myself.
Yeah.
And they were kind of just friends that all hung out together. Sort of Luger gave them the name The Clique because they were always together. I sort of come in at that same time. For whatever reason, I get along great with those guys. We all end up as a group. We're known as The Clique.
Now, you're known as a group backstage.
Because
on stage, some of you guys are baby faces, some of you guys are heels.
Yes.
And from my understanding, the heels and the baby faces never even really hung out that much backstage. They would never ride around together. There was like a real...
To a degree. Slightly before that, you go a generation before that, nobody even associated with each other. If they walked into a bar and there was a bad guy in there and a good guy walked in the bar, you just leave.
So you basically keep the kayfabe going.
Keep it going all the time.
Right.
And, that was at a period of time where guys were getting into fights over, if somebody came to you and said, that stuff's fake, whatever, or, try to criticize it, you get the shit kicked out of you. And there was a lot of badasses in the business at that time that were not afraid to
throw down.
To do that. Yeah, guys like Harley Race and things like that would really, they were legitimate badasses. And if somebody questioned the business, they'd end up beaten up, knocked out, broken leg, whatever,
And the idea is that you have to protect the business because without the business, there's no job.
Yes.
And it's all predicated on this idea that this is 100% real, not scripted, and that people need to believe.
Yeah, though, as you move forward out of that, I think people became accepting of, it's just great entertainment.
Yeah.
So
I want to get to this later because I don't want to interrupt the story, but I think one of the coolest things that I've learned now, especially different from when I was a kid watching wrestling, is how aware the average wrestling fan is of what's going on. And it's become really meta.
It's a click away. Yeah, it's a click away. All the information.
Yeah.
And what's fascinating about our business is, as interesting as the characters we put on TV, right? So there's a moment where there's some people that are just interested in what they see on TV. There are some people that are just as fascinated, if not more so, with what happens behind the scenes. The sort of the who that person is in real life, the politics of it. They make up their own stories in some manner of the things that are going on. Well, I know that guy hates that guy and they don't get along at all. And, we will even perpetuate that through the internet and things like that, where it might not have anything to do with the story that is happening on the show, but we'll perpetuate that partially.
As we get into this, I think that's important that you brought that up because I think that's a huge game change that I hope you get credit for in wrestling, in blurring the lines of what's happening backstage and on stage.
So part of that translates into or relates to this story of what you're talking about. So that group, the Clique, were all very tight backstage. It's not like common knowledge. I wouldn't say everybody knows it, but there's a section of fans that at that time, this is before the internet, are really beginning to understand what goes on behind the scenes and who's really tight and who's not. These guys are friends and that guy isn't, and they don't like this guy, and there's politics with that, whatever.
Right.
So Kevin Nash and Scott Hall make a deal with WCW to leave.
The rival league, who's throwing money around at this point, signing away a bunch of people.
There's a thing, a Monday Night War going on. Vince is coming off of trials and all this stuff where the business is sort of down. WCW goes on the attack, and one of the things that they do is they start really coming after talent with big checks and whereas Vince sort of put you into a position where you were participating in the revenue of the business. So if we went to Madison Square Garden, it was sold out, the gate is this, there's a percentage of that gate that gets paid to talent, that's divvied up amongst the talent, right? There's percentages. So if business is good, you make more money. If business is down, you make less money.
And that's why you protect the business.
Yes. And so WCW, they were just paying guys money.
Yeah, guarantees.
So, Scott Hall decides he's leaving. Shortly thereafter, Kevin Nash goes through this big thing where he doesn't want to leave, but they're offering him so much money. And, our schedule in WWE was at that point in time, we were working, 200, 250 days a year. We were on the road all the time.
Physically grueling.
Yes. Yeah. Just nonstop.
Just the travel wears out a comedian. Like, you travel to sit on a stool on stage. I'm exhausted. You guys are flying through cages.
And in the same business, right? Like the best part of what you do is when you're on that stage, when you're in that ring. And that other 23 hours and 20 minutes of the day is the shit you put up with to get to do your job.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But guys are doing it. It's grueling, it's relentless. And, Kevin gets into a place where they're offering ridiculous money, but he still doesn't want to go. And there's a moment where he tells me right when he has to give the answer, I'm home. He calls me and he's like, I'm not going, staying. I can't do it. And then 2 days later, we're at TV and he's like, I just gave Vince my notice. I'm like, I thought you weren't going. And he's like, basically my wife said, you don't either take that money. I'm not raising this kid by myself with that schedule anymore. You take that money.
Oh, so they shrunk the schedule for WCW.
Yeah, WCW was working, they were mostly just doing TV. They were doing some live events, right? But probably the schedule was half.
Oh, wow. How are they able to give out bigger checks if they weren't doing as much?
That's why they're out of business.
Some good backing.
Yeah. It's it was Ted Turner. It was TBS. Right? A lot of money, and there's a certain point in time where when you're just paying a lot of money and the revenue's not coming in,
it's a time bomb.
Any fool can run a business in the red. It'll take a genius to do that. Right?
Yeah.
So, Kevin and Scott are leaving. Sean and I are staying. There's another guy in the group, Sean Waltman, but he isn't at Madison Square Garden. But we're doing a show at Madison Square Garden. It's their last time at Madison Square Garden. They're leaving shortly thereafter. And Sean comes to me during the day and he's like, hey, I mentioned something to Vince about us all going out at the end of the show and having a moment together. And I said, what did Vince say? And he was like, I guess if that means a lot to you or something like that. And so it was kind of very vague. But what was weird about it was...
It's funny, that's not how...
So what's weird about it is, to the business is, Scott and I are going to wrestle earlier in the show in a street fight.
Yeah.
And I beat Scott and the whole thing. And then Sean and Kevin are going to work a cage match for the WWE at the time, I think WWE title, whatever, in the close of the show. So us coming out there to have a moment together is sort of contrary to the show.
Of course.
Mm-hmm.
But when the time comes to do this, Scott and I wrestle earlier. We have this knockdown, drag out street fight, and then now Kevin and Sean go in there, and we're kind of at the end of the show. And there's the way the Garden was set up in the past. There's a side vom that like guys would always stand at to watch the show. Vince would stand at this curtain. His dad would stand at that curtain, right? That's where they would watch from. And Scott and I were standing there, and they kind of get to the end of the match, and Sean is kind of looking back at us, and Scott says to me, like, are we supposed to go out there? And I'm like, I don't know, dude. And then Scott looks at Vince, and he goes, are we supposed to go out there? And he's like, kind of like, we're all unsure. And then Scott's like, fuck it, I'm going. And he just goes, right? And I think in his mind, like,
I'm quitting.
yeah, I'm out of here anyways, right?
There's no cost to him.
Yeah, fuck it, I'm going. And I'm like, well, fuck. Then they were kind of looking, waving back at me, and I'm like, shit. All right, here I go. So we go out there, and we have this moment. And I mean, the Garden's sold out, and they go ballistic.
So the people are happy to see you all acknowledge that you're friends and break the
It's
kayfabe.
this crazy moment, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's this crazy moment of, like, most people, I believe, at that time, probably in the Garden, especially New York, is so savvy to everything. Like, they know we're all friends. They get it, right? And they know they're leaving. And this is like an incredible, real life moment. This
First
is
time in wrestling history this has happened, where you kind of break.
probably
That's my understanding.
one of the big moments where it actually happened.